Every child in the drift is told the same story before they are old enough to walk on their own. Do not anger a human. Do not corner one. And whatever you do, never, ever take something a human has decided to protect. I used to laugh at it. We all did, the young ones. Our grandparents would lower their voices and say the word human like it was a draft coming under a door, and we would roll our eyes and go back to our games. To us it was a nursery tale, a thing the old ones used to keep us from wandering too far out on the hull plates. There are no monsters, we told each other. There is only the dark and the cold and the long quiet between stations. I was 40 cycles into my life before I learned that the old ones had been telling the truth. And worse, they had been kind. They had softened it. The real story is much harder than the one they tell the children. My name is Veth. I am Seleth, which means very little to you, but it meant everything out there. We are small. We are soft. We have fur the color of dust and hands made for sorting and counting, not for fighting. My people have never won a war in our entire history. We have only ever survived them by being quiet, by being useful, and by being somewhere else when the killing started. So understand that when I tell you I watched a single human stand between 400 armed soldiers and a room full of frightened strangers, I am not a warrior bragging about a battle. I am a clerk telling you what I saw. I counted bodies for a living. I am good at numbers. And the numbers that day did not make sense, no matter how many times I added them. Let me start at the beginning, when it was still an ordinary day, before any of us knew what was coming down out of the black. The station was called Hadeth Reach. If you have never heard of it, that is by design. It was a relief station, one of the last neutral ones, built into the side of a dead moon that nobody had bothered to name. The Korang ran the lanes all around it, but they let Hadeth Reach alone, because even predators need a place to send the things they break but cannot use. Refugees, mostly. The leftovers of small wars. Species like mine, who had lost their worlds and been pushed out into the lanes with nothing but the breath in their lungs. I worked the intake docks. My job was to scan the incoming, log them, ration them, and try not to let anyone die before the supply ship came. The supply ship came once every 90 cycles, if it came at all. Most of the time, my real job was deciding who ate and who waited. That morning, though there is no morning in deep space, we just called the long shift morning out of habit. The air recyclers were grinding. They had been grinding for 6 cycles. The whole station smelled of overheated metal and too many bodies pressed into too small a space. The lights in the lower hold flickered on a count I had memorized. 3 steady, 1 dark, 3 steady. I knew that station the way you know a tooth that aches. Every flaw, every sound it made when it was tired. There were maybe 900 of us aboard, 11 species. Most of them were dying slowly, the way you die when there is just barely enough and never quite enough. The children had stopped crying weeks before. That is the thing nobody tells you about starvation. It is loud at first, and then it goes very quiet, and the quiet is so much worse. And then there was the human. She had come in 2 cycles earlier on a wrecked hauler, the only living thing aboard a ship full of the dead. We did not know what she was at first. The scanner could not place her. It just kept blinking unknown, warm-blooded, bipedal, and refusing to do anything else, like it was scared of her too. She was tall by our measure. Taller than the Korang, even though thinner. She had skin the color of dark river clay and short cropped hair gone gray at the temples, and a scar that ran from her jaw down under the collar of her ruined flight suit. She did not speak for the first cycle. She just sat against the wall of the intake bay with her knees up and her eyes open, watching everything, watching all of us, and we watched her back the way you watch a fire that has gotten loose. Not because it is doing anything, but because you cannot stop imagining what it might do. It was an old Voron trader, a fat fellow named Oz Galen, who finally said the word out loud. That, he said, pointing one trembling claw, is a human. The bay went so quiet I could hear the recyclers grinding 2 decks down. Don't be a fool, I told him. Humans are a story. There are no humans. They were all pinned up after the severance, every last one behind the wall. They never come out. Nobody comes back from the wall. And yet, Osgalen said. I looked at her again, and I will be honest with you, I felt it then. That old cold feeling from when I was small, when my grandmother would say the word and the draft would come under the door. Do not anger a human. I felt it crawl up the back of my neck and settle there, and it did not leave for a long time. She must have heard us. Her eyes moved to Osgalen and then to me, and she said in trade cant, slow and rough, like she had not used her voice in a long while. You don't have to be afraid of me. Which of course only made it worse. Her name was Marin Osai. We learned that on the second cycle when she finally started talking. She had been a soldier once, she said, and then a medic, and then something in between that did not have a clean name. She had been on the wrong side of a coring slaving sweep 3 systems over, had stolen a hauler, had run it until it died, and had drifted into our lane more dead than alive. I want to tell you she was gentle, and she was, but that is not the right word. A blade can be gentle when it wants to be. She was careful. That is closer. By the second cycle, she was helping in the medical bay. By the third, the children had started following her. Seleth children, Voron children, the little furred ones and the little scaled ones, all of them trailing after this enormous strange creature like she was a moon they had decided to orbit. She would sit with them and show them how to fold their ration paper into shapes, birds, she called them, though none of us had ever seen a bird. She had big hands, scarred across the knuckles, and she folded the paper so slowly, so carefully, that you forgot for a moment what those hands had been built to do. I was the one who logged her into the manifest. Osai Marin, human, 1. 1, as if that meant anything small. She found me at my counting station on the 4th cycle. I was running the ration math, the way I did every shift, deciding who ate. She watched me work for a while in silence. How long does the food last? She asked. 12 cycles, I said. If the supply ship comes, 16 if I cut everyone to half. And if it doesn't come? I did not answer. She already knew. Everyone aboard knew. The supply ship had been late before, but never this late, and lately the coring patrols had been thicker in the lane, circling, the way the big scavenger fish circle a thing that is not quite dead yet. They're coming back, aren't they? Marin said. It was not a question. The ones who had me, they don't like loose ends. We are neutral, I said. Hadeth reaches neutral, they leave us alone. She looked at me for a long moment. There was something terrible in her face, and it took me a while to understand what it was. It was not fear, it was pity. She felt sorry for me for what I still believed. There's no such thing as neutral, she said quietly, to people like that. There's only what they want and what's in the way. I went back to my counting, but my hands were not steady anymore. They came on the 6th cycle. I was on the upper observation deck when the proximity alarm went. I remember the sound exactly, a low double tone, the one we never used, the one that meant ship and not a friendly one. I had heard it tested. I had never heard it real. I looked out through the viewport, and there it was, coming up over the curve of the dead moon, blocking out the stars one by one as it rose. A coring slaver cruiser, black and barbed, longer than our whole station, its hull pocked with gun mounts and the dark rectangles of the holding cells where they put the ones they took. It was beautiful, in the way a thing can be beautiful when it is utterly without mercy. It moved like it owned the dark, and in front of it, like teeth in front of a mouth, came the smaller craft, the boarding pods, dozens of them, peeling off and burning toward our docks. I counted them, I could not help it, it is what I do. 40 pods, 10 soldiers to a pod, give or take. 400. 400 coring soldiers coming down out of the black, toward 900 starving refugees, and a station with no guns and no army, and no one to defend it. And one human, sitting on the floor of the medical bay, folding paper birds for children who had forgotten how to cry. Part 2. The first thing the coring did when they breached the lower dock, was kill the dock master. His name was Tun. He was Varan, old, half-blind, and he had run those docks for 30 cycles without ever raising his voice to anyone. He went down to meet them with his hands open and empty, the way you are supposed to, the way our whole lives had taught us: be small, be useful, be somewhere else. He told them we were neutral. He told them we had nothing worth taking. They shot him through the chest and stepped over him without slowing down. I watched it on the deck monitor. I will see it for the rest of my life. Their commander came aboard last, the way the worst of them always do, after the danger is past. His name, I learned it later, was Vraga Sol. He was huge even for a Korang, plated in dark armor, and he walked through the body of the dock master and into our station like he was walking into a room he already owned. He had his soldiers herd us into the main hold. All 900 of us packed in under the flickering lights, 3 steady, 1 dark, 3 steady. The Korang lined the walls with their weapons up. The children had started crying again. I remember being glad of it in a strange, numb way. At least the quiet was over. Vraga Sol climbed onto a cargo crate so we could all see him, and he spoke to us in trade cant, slow and pleasant, the way you would speak to animals you were about to load. "You have something that belongs to me," he said. "A human female. She killed 9 of my crew and stole my property and ran. I have come a long way to collect her." He spread his clawed hands wide, almost kind. "Give her to me and I will leave the rest of you to starve in peace. Hide her and I will take one of you for every hour she stays hidden, starting with the small ones." The hold went silent, even the children. I was near the front. I could see Marin. She was standing against the far wall, half a head taller than anyone around her, and I watched the whole room understand at the same moment what the math was. 900 lives, 1 human. There was no calculation here. There was only the obvious answer, the survival answer, the answer my whole species had been built across 1,000 generations to give. Be small, be useful, be somewhere else. A Voron near me started to lift his hand to point at her. And Marin spoke before he could. "I'm right here," she said. She did not shout it. She did not have to. The whole hold heard it. She stepped forward through the crowd, and the crowd parted around her like water, and she walked out into the open space in front of Vraga Sol's crate with her scarred hands loose at her sides. "You don't have to take anyone," she said. "I'm not hiding. I never was. Let these people go and you can have me." Vraga Sol looked down at her and made the wet clicking sound that Korang make when they are pleased. "Of course," he said. "Of course you would come out. I knew you would. Your kind always does. It is the one predictable thing about you." He leaned down toward her. "You cannot help yourselves. You would die for strangers. It is a sickness in you." "Maybe," Marin said. "It is why we built the wall," Vraga Sol went on, almost gently, almost like a teacher. "Not because you were strong. You are not strong. You are small and slow and you break so easily. We built the wall because you do not stop, because there is no amount of pain that teaches you, because you would rather die badly than live quietly." He straightened up and signaled to his soldiers. "Take her, and take 50 of the others for the trouble of coming all this way." That was his mistake. It was such a small thing. He had her. He had won. He could have just taken her and gone. But the Korang do not know how to win. They only know how to take and then take more, because taking is the only thing that has ever made them feel alive. "And take 50 of the others." I watched Marin's face change. I have tried many times since to describe what I saw, and I have never managed it. It was not rage exactly. Rage is hot. This was cold. It was the look of someone setting down a heavy thing they have been carrying for a very long time and deciding, finally, to use both hands. "No," she said. "Here is the part nobody believes when I tell it. So I will tell it slowly, and you can believe me or not. There were 400 of them. There was one of her. She had no weapon. She had been starving for 6 cycles like the rest of us. She was, by every measure that should matter, the weakest thing in that room. The first coring soldier reached for her arm. She took his weapon away from him. I do not mean she fought him for it. I mean she took it, the way you take a toy from a child, one motion, and then the weapon was hers and his arm was bent the wrong way and he was screaming. And she had already moved past him into the second soldier, before the first one had finished falling. I told you I count things. I will tell you the count. In the first 10 seconds, she killed 6. The hold erupted. The Korang turned their weapons inward, toward her, but we were all around her, 900 of us packed in tight, and they could not fire into the crowd without killing the very things they had come to harvest. So they had to come at her with their hands and their blades in close, 1 and 2 at a time, into the narrow space. And in close, against a human, numbers stop meaning what you think they mean. She moved through them like weather. There is no other way to say it. Like a storm moving through a field of standing grain. The big ones, the armored ones, the ones who had killed our dock master without slowing down, they went down around her and they did not get up. She used the first soldier's weapon until it was empty, and then she used it as a club, and then she used the things she took from the next bodies, and when those were gone she used her hands. Her hands, those big scarred hands that had folded paper birds so slowly for the children. I saw her take a blade through the side. I saw the dark wet bloom on her flight suit. She did not stop. I saw a Korang twice her size get both arms around her from behind, and I thought, that is the end. No one survives that. And she snapped her head back into his face and broke something and kept going, dragging him a step before he let go and fell. Vraga Sul was screaming orders from his crate. Kill her, why is she not dead? And I remember thinking, with the strange, clear part of my mind that never stops counting. Because you told her there was no amount of pain that would teach her. And you were right. You were right, and you said it to her face, and now you are going to learn what that means. The children were not crying anymore. The whole hold had gone silent again, but it was a different silence now. 900 starving, beaten, broken refugees, 11 species who had spent their whole lives being small and being useful and being somewhere else. We stood and we watched a human do the thing our oldest stories had warned us about, and not one of us looked away. She was protecting us. That was the thing. Every soldier she put down was a soldier who could not put a blade in a child behind her. She kept herself between them and us the entire time. Bleeding, breaking, slowing, but always between. She had decided we were hers to protect, and there is nothing in the galaxy more dangerous than that. It could not last. Of course it could not last. She was one and she was hurt, and 400 is 400 even against a monster. They got her down at last, near the foot of Vraga Sul's crate. 3 of them on her, then 5, then more, pinning those terrible hands, and even then she fought. Even then she was reaching, and I could hear her breathing from where I stood, ragged, wet, furious. Vraga Sul climbed down from his crate. He was not pleasant anymore. His pleasant mask was gone, and the thing underneath it was just hunger and fear, and he hated her for showing him his own fear in front of his crew. He drew his sidearm, the only one in the room he trusted not to miss, and he pressed it to her head. "You see," he said, but his voice was shaking now. "You see what you are. You are an animal that does not know when it is beaten. There is no glory in this. There is no song. There is only a stupid beast bleeding on a floor, and the people you died for will be in my cells by morning." He leaned close to her. Was it worth it? And Marin Osei, with 5 Korang holding her down and a weapon against her skull, and her own blood spreading dark across the deck plates, looked up at him and smiled. "You came aboard with 400, she said. Her voice was wrecked, but every word was clear. "Count them now." Part 3. He should not have looked. I have thought about that moment more than any other. He should not have looked. He had her. He had the weapon to her head. All he had to do was pull the trigger and it was over, and the story ends there, and 900 of us go into the cells, and the Korang go home, and the legend of humans stays just a legend. But he could not help it, because under all that armor and all that hunger, Vraga Sul was afraid, and fear makes you look. He lifted his head and he counted his soldiers. I had already counted them. I told you, it is what I do. There were not 400 Korang standing in that hold anymore. There were not even 200. The floor was a field of the fallen, dark armored shapes piled where she had put them, and the ones still standing were pressed back against the walls, and they were not looking at her with hunger now. They were looking at her the way my grandmother used to say the word human, like a draft coming under a door. Like something their own oldest stories had warned them about, and they had not believed it either until now. And in the half-second that Vraga Sul spent counting, the half-second he should not have spent, she moved. I do not fully understand what happened. I was counting bodies, not watching her hands. But the weapon that had been against her head was suddenly in her hand instead of his, and Vraga Sul was stumbling back with a look of enormous surprise on his face, and the 5 soldiers holding her down were no longer holding anything, because she was up. She was up. I would not have believed a living thing could stand from where she was, in the state she was in. But she stood, swaying dark with her own blood, and she put Vraga Sul's own weapon under his jaw, and the whole room went still. "Tell them to stand down," she said. He did. His voice cracked, but he did. The Korang lowered their weapons. The ones near the doors started backing through them. Predators understand one thing perfectly, the one thing they have built their whole world around. When the prey turns out to be something worse than they are, you run. They ran. They left their commander and their fallen, and they ran for the boarding pods. And I heard the pods detaching one after another, burning back up toward the black cruiser, and the cruiser itself turning, sliding back down behind the curve of the dead moon, fleeing a station full of starving refugees and one human who could barely stand. Vraga Sul was the last. She walked him to the dock herself, the weapon never leaving his throat, every step leaving a dark print on the deck. At the airlock she stopped. She leaned in close to him, and I was near enough to hear it. "You built a wall to keep us in," she said. Keep it up forever, because the only reason your kind still breathes is that most of us decided, a long time ago, to stay on our side of it." She took the weapon away from his throat. "Now go home and tell them what you saw. Tell them the stories are true. Tell them we're worse than the stories. And then pray you never make one of us angry again." She put him in a pod, and she let him go. I have wondered since why she did that, why she let him live. He had killed our dock master. He would have taken our children. By any count I know how to make, he deserved the floor with the rest of them. I think, and I am only a clerk, so what do I know? I think she let him go because killing him would have been easy, and being a monster was never the point. The point was the children behind her. The point was the wall between, and which side of it she had decided to stand on. A monster that protects is still a monster, but it is your monster, and she wanted them to know that. She wanted them to carry that knowledge home in their bones. The supply ship came 11 cycles later. Marin did not see it. She lived for 3 cycles after the fight, in the medical bay she had worked in. With the children she had folded birds for sitting around her on the floor. Our medics did what they could, but they had never treated a human, and there was so much of her that was broken. She did not seem to mind. She seemed, if anything, at peace, in a way I had not seen in her before, like a thing that had been carrying something heavy for a very long time, and had finally set it down. I sat with her near the end. I do not know why she let me. I am not brave, and I am not important. I count things. But she asked for me by name, Veth, where's the one who counts, and I came, and I sat by her, and for a while neither of us said anything. "You logged me in," she said finally. Her voice was very quiet now. "When I came aboard, I saw you do it." "I did." "What did you write?" I told her, Osei Marin Human 1. She made a sound that I think was a laugh. It cost her something. "1," she said. "Yeah, that's about right." She was quiet again for a while. The lights flickered. 3 steady, 1 dark, 3 steady. The children breathed around us in the dark. "They tell stories about us, don't they?" she said. Out here past the wall. Yes, I said. They tell their children to keep them from wandering too far. Do not anger a human. Do not corner one. Never take what a human has decided to protect. Good stories. Frightening ones, I said. We thought they were only stories. We thought there were no monsters. Only the dark and the cold and the long quiet between stations. She turned her head and looked at me, and there was that thing in her face again, the terrible gentle thing. Get them a better story, she said. Will you do that? You count things, you'll get it right. She closed her eyes. Tell them the monster was tired. Tell them she didn't want to be one. Tell them she'd have rather been folding paper for the kids. A breath. But tell them she'd do it again. Every time, for anyone, tell them that part. I told her I would. She died sometime in the next sleep cycle, quietly, with a Selith child asleep against her side. The child did not wake until morning, and when it did, it cried, and for once I was glad of the sound. That was a long time ago now. I am old. I do not work the intake docks anymore. I tell stories instead to the children the way the old ones told them to me, but I tell them differently than my grandmother did. I still say the words, do not anger a human, do not corner one, never take what a human has decided to protect. The children still roll their eyes the way I used to, because to them it is only a story and there are no monsters, only the dark and the cold and the long quiet between stations. And then I tell them the truth. I tell them the monsters are real. I tell them I saw one with these eyes, that I counted the 400 who came down out of the black and counted the ones who walked away, and the numbers have never once made sense, no matter how many times I add them. But I tell them the part she asked me to tell. I tell them the monster was tired. I tell them she folded paper into the shapes of birds slowly, with hands that were built for something else. I tell them she stood between 400 soldiers and a room full of strangers because she had decided we were hers, and that there is nothing in all the galaxy more dangerous or more precious than a thing that has decided to protect you. They built a wall to keep the monsters in. I am glad the wall is there. I sleep better for it. But on the bad nights, the cold ones, the ones where the recyclers grind and the lights flicker 3 steady, 1 dark, 3 steady, I find myself hopping just a little, that somewhere out past that wall there are more of them. Tired ones, gentle ones, ones with scarred hands and quiet voices who would rather be folding paper for someone's children. Because the legends were true, I promise you they were true. The stories were only ever too kind.